Okay, well, conscious community in the future, welcome. You get to watch this whenever you like on replay. So I hope that you can learn something from the wonderful Julia here this evening. Thank you so much for coming.
My,
Um, I'd love to kick off by asking about your history and what drew you towards, I suppose, mending and visible mending instead of simply making new clothes.
yeah, sure. So I learned to sew from my mom when I was about 8, and I loved it. But I was like, this won't be like my career. I'll be an architect. And I think I was about 14, and I was something like, why would I want to be an architect when I love sewing? I should just do that all day.
Ah,
So what happened was I was like, okay. So then I sort of studied at RMIT. I moved to Melbourne. I'm originally from Adelaide.
mm,
Moved to Melbourne, studied at RMIT, did design, and as part of that, there was a course which sort of looked at like emotionally durable design theory and how can we design more sustainably and the problems with the fashion industry. And I was like, okay, we should, we need to, I need to sort of consider this and work with that. And yeah, it just kind of was the start of a learning journey, I guess. So a lot of my design work kind of began to ask, how can people be engaged with their clothes? How could they a little bit of like redesign. I did like some participatory design projects, and then I had my sort of final or penultimate sort of project or exploration was around this idea of multi-layered garments, which you could cut away or damaged. Yeah, so it
oh
was like,
wow.
but it sort of wasn't the outcome as a whole wasn't really very practical, but the ideas that were being explored were really kind of fun. So I
Yeah.
did and then I was working locally, like interning, doing the classic retail job to pay the bills. And I kind of was like, okay, I'm ready to get paid, essentially. And I didn't want to find work in a, big company where you're just designing crap, or well,
Yeah.
not crap, but you don't really actually get to actively be engaged in sustainability. So
Mm.
I went to Denmark to work overseas in a corporate sustainability role. Like this was literally like the few months before COVID starts, like right at the start of 2020,
Oh my
which was
goodness.
I was there for like a month and a half in total. And
Oh,
then I was off because of COVID. And I came back to
oh,
Australia partner and I was like, oh crap, like what am I gonna do? It's the start of a pandemic, which at that point, we thought we were gonna end in a few months, but that obviously didn't eventuate. And I was like, okay, what do I do? So then I applied to do a PhD because somebody told me you could get a funded spot. So I started doing my PhD, and that just kind of gave me a lot of freedom and time to explore different things. And as part
yeah.
of I just kind of was re engaging with my wardrobe and started fixing some things. And I sort of realized how important it is to kind of make those kind of repairs and fixes visible and make that normal. So I guess fixing my clothes kind of came about because I was already sort of doing some repairs. And I'll admit most of the repairs were more visible rather than invisible because it's a bit easier to do visible repairs, in my opinion, than invisible ones.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I was like, okay. So I just kind of started doing them that way. And then I started sharing them like on my Instagram, kind of with this intention of just being like, oh, like, other people should think that repairing stuff is normal. So I should share. Um, yeah, and a bit as well around like just trying to share what knowledge I did have. Like a lot of repair is obviously super closely linked to design and how clothes are designed. You understand how they're designed, it's much easier to understand how to repair them. So
Yeah.
that was kind of the origins of it. And yeah, so that was how it started off. And then I kind of just, obviously I was sharing things. And then a friend of a friend worked at like a local council. And then she was like, oh, do you want to come do some like repair projects with us? And I was like, oh, I was like, okay, I guess I could do that.
Haha.
So then, yeah, just kind of started doing a few different repair things and just kind of kept that ball rolling. And now I've started to get involved in like maybe setting up a repair cafe at our university and just things like that. So it's kind of been a bit of a like just it kind of organically grows in its own way. But
Yeah.
it's kind of come out of this sort of attitude, how do we make these sort of practices around repair and reuse more normal? So that's like my
Yeah.
long, short history.
Brilliant. I cannot believe you were in Denmark right before lockdowns began. Oh,
It
that's
was
just such a long plane journey to only be there for a month and a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really feel that way because, like, on the way over, we were thinking we were going to be there for months, and on the way back, we were like, so
Oh
thankfully.
gosh. Um,
But
I'll quickly say hello to Maria, who's just popped
okay,
in.
nice
Lovely
to
to see you here. And I do a show of hands, but Maria, since you're here and we're not very busy, do you have sewing experience yourself?
It says, hi, Julie. We met once in person.
Oh,
And
lovely.
hi, Chloe. I never met you, but it's just, I think this is very nice to set up the community. So my experience is that, to be honest, I grew up in a family where mending clothes was a normal thing, or it was also in a big extended family, it was normal to
Yeah.
mend clothes. And it's just for me, I did not know any other way. And only as adult, when I learned that some people are just throwing clothes just because
Mm.
the small hole or something, then I thought, I just cannot believe that that actually happens. That people don't have even the small ability of
Yeah.
to do a small stitch. And yeah, um,
Yeah.
it's I feel this is that I'm do a lot of mending of my clothes, be it, I don't know, socks, underwear, or whatever. It's just that sweaters, but I don't
Brilliant.
and I'm excited to see how creative you can get with mending, because my normal approach is really just to do a stitch over it, and then this is kind of looks okay and it's still wearable. But it's just that's for me. It's just now as an adult, I'm discovering how beautiful it could look.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm a bit. I know Julie had yesterday the session, and this is I'm a bit upset that I missed it, but I says yeah.
Aha. Oh, I'm
And
sure
I'm
you'll
glad
learn a
that
bit
there is an
today, so that's
opportunity
good.
online to do that. Didn't know. Is just that did I feel kind of odd, says that you already had a chat, and I'm just joining you a bit later.
Don't worry, I just asked how Julia's ethical fashion and fixing journey began. Yes, you're here just in time. Let's kick into Julia's hands. Let me remember
Yes,
how to do
yes.
this.
With a
I'll spotlight
switch
your
to
hands.
Ooh, okay.
Here we
Yeah, we
are.
really set up going. So
Oh,
perfect. Yeah. So I was just going to do a little bit of a tour of kind of the different sorts of things that I guess I use and that I find helpful. I'm sort of starting with this little kit. They were available for sale yesterday, but if you're interested in one, just send me a message on Instagram. But just
awesome.
because they've got a few of the basic kind of things that you probably want for mending. So you've got a bit of a range of some pins.
Mm.
This can just help hold things like patches in place. I've got some snips. You could just as easily use like little scissors, but these are just kind of make that trimming threads and that type of thing nice and easy.
Okay. So
And
it's
then you've
more
got
for
some
threads
needle.
than for fabric?
Pardon?
So it's more for just cutting threads than for fabric?
Yeah, yeah. Because generally with fabric, you want scissors that are probably a bit more like, say, like this. So
Yes,
something
right.
a bit bigger, a bit easier to cut. Just because if you cut with small scissors, you'll find that you don't cut very straight. Whereas cutting with bigger
Ah,
scissors, they've got a bit more weight. You can kind of, yeah, cut things a little bit
mm,
straighter.
gotcha.
Mm.
And then you just need like a bit of an assortment of needles. So you can see here, this is a little pack. They've got a whole range of sizes. You just generally use different size needles for different projects. So if you've got really lightweight, say like a silk or a chiffon or something that's really sort of transparent and lightweight, you'd probably want to use a really thin needle.
Mm.
Whereas if you've got, say, something like denim, you probably want to use something a bit bigger. And if you can see, oh, let's see if I can get this in focus. There's one giant ass needle. That one you'd
Mm-hmm.
probably almost never use, except maybe on a mattress stitching or like something really thick,
A
like a pulse.
mattress. Okay.
But I will show you how you can also use it for darning, but you just need to use it in a particular way. But maybe
Okay.
we'll see if we get time for that. So
Yes, sure.
yeah, those are kind of a few of the things. You also obviously need some thread. I mean, it kind of depends what type of repair we're doing, but for the one we're doing tonight, you need some thread. And then, yeah, I thought maybe I'll show you a few repairs and I'll explain kind of the different things that I use for them. And I thought that might be a nice little activity. The thing to
Yes.
keep in mind is I'll just show you some thread. So we've got some regular thread here, and I've got some embroidery thread as well. And you can see that they're quite different thicknesses. So one's really skinny and one's quite fat. So the embroidery thread you can also split up into, say, smaller strands.
Yeah.
Like that. And embroidery thread, it kind of is great for things where you want it to be really distinctive, you want that thickness and that boldness.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're doing sort of a repair that's maybe a bit more invisible or on something that's really lightweight, just a regular sewing thread will do the job just fine.
Okay.
So I've got a bit of a range. I just pick up embroidery threads from op shops. often you can find there's like embroidery packs and things where you can get a whole range of different colors. And these types of threads, I kind of either get, I've got the bunch that I just bought when I was a student. You can easily pick them up from like Lincraft, but I also find some in op shops as well. So it just kind of depends. If you need something for a particular project and you want to match the color, probably go to one of the sewing shops near you and get the thread to match. But if you kind of just want to build up your stash, I personally recommend op shops are great. So that's your kind of thread options. So what I'll do is I'll show you. So this, for example, is one project that's just done with regular thread. So hopefully you can see there, it's just got some grey stitching. It's not super thick. And you can even use it for sort of more embellishment kind of things like here.
Oh, yes.
But you can use a thicker embroidery thread as well. I don't have any demos on hand for that, but I will show you some other types of repairs. So you can also use, the technique that I'm using tonight is very much a patching sort of technique. You can use it on knitwear. So this is a t-shirt, and I've backed it with a very lightweight piece of knit. Generally, I don't use this technique on knits because I'll show you what I use instead. But for really lightweight t-shirts, this type of little patch can be quite nice. You can see this is a beloved old t-shirt. So this is kind of one technique that I do use, but sometimes you get issues like this where it can kind of pull a bit in the corner and you have to add a new patch. Okay. So it just kind of depends. The other ways you can repair things are with darning. So here's a range of a few different darns that I've done.
Ooh,
so
wow.
They're fantastic, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a bit of a bigger project that's mid project, not quite there yet. So this one I used a range of yarns. The purple is from a local wool shop on the Great Ocean Road called Tarndy, as is the light green, but the sort of darker colours, you can see this one here, is from Not Another Hat. Let me see if I can.
Not Another Hat.
Yeah. And she makes this yarn. You can see the colour. Oh, I'll get a bit closer again. The colour kind of changes a bit. You can see it's not super consistent.
Yeah.
But that's because she unravels jumpers and then re-ravels it. You can kind of see that the thread, when you unravel it from hers, kind of gets a bit crimpy. That's because it's been unravelled and re-dyed or over-dyed.
Gotcha. Upcycled yarn. Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a bit of a mix. So depending on what your values are around that, this can be a good way to maybe find yarns that aren't like virgin fibers. So if you want to use wool but you don't want to use virgin wool, she's a little Etsy store where I really recommend it.
That's really brilliant. I'll link that.
Thanks. And then, I mean, you can also find things at like your op shops, or if you've got anyone that does like textiles, sometimes they've got like a scrap bin and you can get other types. If you're not fussed about whether it's virgin or recycled, sometimes if you've got any local knitters or little shops who do like local knitwear, they'll often knit on site and they might be happy to sell you a little bit of their wool as well. So that's a few options. The other place you can get wool is from a little shop called Francie, who do knitwear as well. Again, it's virgin, so if that's something that's not your cup of tea, then probably skip that. But the reason I guess I'm talking about wool is that when you are darning knitwear, it's good to try and match your fibres. So if you've got a wool jumper that needs mending, try and use wool, or a cashmere or mohair or something similar. If you've got a cotton jumper, then try and use a cotton thread. So that's kind of the principle, just because then it will sort of blend in a bit better. This is, I probably won't demo today. I'll probably demo a little patch, but we can see what everybody wants, or if Maria's got any preferences.
Like a large wooden mushroom.
Yeah, so this one's from Francie and I love it because it's super nifty. It like unravels and then you can keep your darning needles in there.
That's fantastic.
I
didn't know that trick.
Yeah, it's good. So this is a bit of a range now. I was just going to show you the difference between a regular needle and a darning needle. Let me just hold this up nice and close. Can you see how the darning needle, which is the one on the left, isn't very pokey, but then the one on is pokey? Yeah. So if you've only got regular needles when you're darning,
Mm.
instead of going pointy tip first, you can go the eye of the needle first. Because the idea is, the reason why darning needles are blunt is so that when you go through the yarn, you go in between the yarns, you don't split a yarn.
Okay. And the sharp end might split it instead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why when I'm like, when you create this, it's a weaving and you go in and out.
Yeah. I see. Yeah, well, you wouldn't want to split it in that case. It would ruin the fun.
You don't. So using the eye of the needle can be a good option. So that's when if you've got something like that needle pack that I was showing you, you can still use one of the really chunky needles. And even if they're sharp on one end, you can just use the other end. So that's what I did for quite a while until I started getting some darning yarn. So it's a good option if you're not sure if you want to do darning. So
give it a quick go. Do you have to be quite careful of your fingers, or is it easy to not poke yourself?
Oh, it's all right. You kind of hold the middle of the needle, so it's not too bad. So so that's the mushroom. You don't even need a mushroom either. So the mushroom you put underneath to hold the knit in place while you're working.
Okay.
And then you work.
But you can just it's a smooth surface, you won't poke into it or anything.
Yeah, exactly. And something that you can stab and it doesn't damage anything. But you can also just use like an orange or a lemon. They work really, really well. And then so, and they've, most people have got one lying around. Not everybody has a darning mushroom. So that's some other tools that you might choose to use for darning. The other thing is you might need to get rid of some pills on your garment. So when it gets all fluffy and pilly, I think I've already done this jumper. But when you get little bubbles on your jumper, maybe another one has it.
Oh no, you need an example of pilling.
Yeah, I think I've got a little bit on this one. Let me just move this jumper. Okay. So you can see here. Yes,
oh yes, I see.
Can you see the little bubbles?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can use different things for them. So you can use a pilling comb like this one, or you can use an electric pillar. So the electric pillar, it goes zzz, and what you do is you put it on and you press, and how it works is the little pills, the little balls go in the holes, and the holes chop the pills off.
How brilliant.
Yeah, so it's really good for this type of chunky one where there's some bigger pills, but if you've got something that the pilling is really fine, sometimes this one isn't as helpful, and then this one can be quite good, which you just like literally brush over and it'll catch the pills and pull them off.
Oh, great.
So I picked up this one from Milligram, I think. I don't know if they still stock them, but you can just search for a pilling comb. So so that's really my main tour of all the bits and bobs that I do, and the main materials that I use. Oh yeah, on this jumper, I'll just show you. There's another example of some darning. So here's some other darning. So you can see here, this one's a bit of a different style. So instead of it being all rectangles, I've done little extra stitches that sort of extend it and have with some colours. So that's kind of a big overview of all the different methods. The other thing to note is when you do have little stray scraps, I have a little, fried onion container that I put them in, and then I'm going to use this as stuffing for a pillow. So I keep all the little threads and trims and any sort of little offcuts in there. Oh, there's even a rubber band in there. Okay, that's not supposed to be in. All right.
Nice. So everything's getting reused.
The overview of all of my little methods. What I'm going to show you next is how to do a patch on a garment. So this is sort of a really simple, easy technique that can look really beautiful. So you can kind of see just one little patch here. But I guess to kind of help you see what it can become is you might end up doing multiple patches.
Ooh.
So this patch is on the top, but the other patches sit underneath. And you can see that I did like one patch. Where did I start? I think I started with this patch.
Yeah.
And then I added on the silk patch, and I added on another little patch, and we might even add on a third one tonight, maybe. You can kind of see how this can get built up over time. So what you need for this is, as I was saying before, some pins. So I'll show you. This is my big ass jar of pins. Again, you can tell the reuse strategy happens quite a lot for Advert Doritos. But you need some pins and you'll need some needles. Now I use this one because I've already got it open. And some thread. So I've got some thread here. And what you're going to do is you then want to have a look at your patch or your hole and see how big a patch you need to do. So you can see I've got a bit of wear and tear here and through here. So I might do a bigger rectangle, I reckon, that kind of covers up most of these holes.
Is it linen? So
this is, it's a linen shirt, and I've got this is another linen scrap. So you can use different fabrics, but generally the closer your fabric match, the better it'll sort of blend together and hide it. So for example, I mean, I have used cotton before on like linen shirts, but if you've got linen scraps, that's probably the best option. If you're mending something that's like silk or really drapey, then try to match it with something that's also really soft and drapey. For like those thin, lightweight t-shirts, like what I was showing you, I mean, if it's your t-shirt, you probably could even use old underwear. But I mean, if you're doing a mend for someone else, I might not appreciate that. So just again, trying to think, what fabric would be really similar? So if you're doing a crotch repair, which is very common, for example, in jeans, maybe try and have a denim scrap. So yeah, but if you're looking for where to find scraps, if you don't have any, often the local fabric store can just sell you like 10 or 20 centimeters of a roll of fabric, and then that'll give you patches. Yeah, sometimes they'll have little remnant boxes too, so you could always have a look for that as well. So yeah, but it's also, keep in mind, you might have a few garments that all need one type of patch, and maybe you choose to get like a color that will kind of work with all of them or something like that too.
Good idea.
So I'm going to cut the patch, and I probably want it needs to be at least a centimeter bigger than the hole that I'm trying to patch, essentially, on like each side. So I'll probably cut it. So we've gone a bit like that. We'll go a little bit further. Oh, I'm not cutting this very straight, but anyways.
It's fine.
Maybe it's an odd thing to say.
You would recommend always to put it on top, or?
No, so these ones here are underneath and this one's on top. Lately I've been really enjoying putting them underneath. I think it just depends what look you want as well. So like this one as well, for example, here is on top, but because it's a collar and I mainly wear it open, it's actually more like it's underneath. Does that make sense? So just kind of figure what you want and what look you want. But maybe I could put this one on top. Maybe we'll mix it up for a second. Maybe I'll put it underneath. So
shirt that you're salvaging, is it did you find it in an op shop, or has it been passed down to you?
So the scrap that I'm using is actually from a friend who has a local business, and she gave me some scraps from her brand to use for repair events and similar. So that's good. Actually from ABCH, which is a great local brand, who sells some really beautiful t-shirts, which are like produced locally and like really responsibly sourced from the fabric all the way down to like the thread and the labels and everything. So fantastic. Great little brand. So Courtney kindly was like, I was there picking up something else, and I was like, oh, can I have some of your scraps? And she's like, yeah, sure.
Oh, she must have loved that.
Thank you. So yeah, she was going to do something with them anyway, but she was like, oh, that's fine, you can have them. And I'm like, okay. So that can also be a good thing if you've got someone who makes locally near you. They might be a willing donation. So I'm putting out a needle for this one, and as I said, kind of think about what thickness. So this is probably a good weight for the linen. If I was doing, say, denim, let's see if I can pull out a fatter needle, or if my needle case is gonna hate on me. It might be hating on me. So sometimes you overstuff them and then they get stuck. So learn from my mistakes. But say you can use something heavier for. Let's see if any of these are a bit chunkier. Yeah, this is a bit chunkier. Okay. So if you kind of have a look, good ones for denim are ones where you feel like you can kind of give them a bit of a bend and you're not worried about them breaking. This one I'm a bit like, oh, I feel a bit like if I pushed a bit too hard it might break. So that's probably a good one for the linen. But you want something which you feel like you can really stab, and it's not if you're working on like a denim, say. So just kind of think about it in that sense. Like, do I trust this needle to not break when it gets stitched through this? So yes, that's the needle that I'm going to go with. I've got some thread here. I've been using this for most of this shirt, as you can kind of tell, but I could use a different color. Oh, maybe I should. No, I don't have any super handy. Oh, no.
The color looks good. Also, coming back to the scraps, during the Zero Waste Festival, I saw there is one organization is doing the swaps between the fabrics or offcuts or whatever you've got. That would be suitable for using for sewing or mending. And
that's great.
Yeah, I thought so too. I will immediately share it with my friend Audrey, the one you also met.
Amazing. Oh, there you go. So that type of thing can be good. Sorry, you just hear me rifling through my
what a selection.
Yeah, so this is my stash. So you can see. Some of it needs tidying. But
You're obviously a big fan of Gutermann, the German one.
Well, I did buy a lot when I was a student, and a lot of it's hung around. So I have about like 4 or 5 rolls of top stitching thread all from one project. So this is a bit thicker. So if you were looking for, say, cotton for darning with, not this type of project, but that darning instead of a wool, top stitching thread can be a good way. This is a polyester though, so maybe see if you can get a thicker cotton. But you know, in a pinch. So yes,
would you recommend to? I'm quite often also go in op shop and try to go for cotton or some thicker material, and this is not looking so much on the polyester. But would you still recommend to use polyester as for stitching?
Generally, what I would say is it really depends. For the most part, I mean, I'm probably not going to buy virgin polyester anymore. I think when I bought this, I probably didn't know better. So I mainly try and source from op shop. So like this one here is from an op shop. But the problem with that is depending on what you're sewing, sometimes you'll find the quality, it's like not as sturdy. It can be a bit of an unknown factor. So what I guess I'd say is personally, I like using threads like, say, this is a tencel thread. You can see it's a really giant roll. So this is from a company called Circular Sourcing, which is on, they actually have a store now. And they said this is tencel, so that's from tree pulp. Sorry, the top's got popped. But it is quite expensive because it's obviously a giant ass roll. It's like $30 a roll. So this is what I buy for my basic colors now, as I'm slowly running out of my other colors. And yeah, but they do sell some smaller rolls on there. So if I'm buying virgin, I'll probably try and do that. But it also just depends, you know, if you're stitching for hand stitching, most stuff will work. And most of this, like, you know, op shop mystery thread is fine. If I'm doing something really heavy duty on my sewing machine, I mean, I might run into more trouble. But mostly the tencel I haven't had any issues with tencel. But sometimes cotton, just because this could be 30 years old, you know, who knows? So it can be a bit of a mixed bag. So I tend to avoid buying virgin threads, which are polyester, but it's also like I haven't had a project where I've really needed a super close color match. So it just kind of depends what you need. But if you just want to buy a whole bunch of white thread, so stuff in white, then yeah, maybe think about getting a tencel or something like that.
Yeah, so, tencel is a
does that answer your
material.
question? Sorry, it was a very long-winded answer, I realized.
Sorry for distracting you.
You definitely don't need to use polyester. I think any thread is fine. Most threads work. So for this, most threads work. I'm now rifling through my other back drawers to be like, maybe I've got more pink, but I don't think I do. So I'm going to stick with my tan color. But I mean, I could do a nice pastel pink if I had pastel pink, but I don't have pastel pink, so tan it is. Now I can't really demonstrate because neither of the two, actually kind of you can see here. So a good length for your thread is from your hand to your opposite shoulder. So it kind of barely fits on the screen. But yeah, I'm doing like I'm shooting an arrow. Anyway, yes, that length is generally a nice, manageable length.
Okay.
For most projects, you might want to just do an arm length without your shoulder width if you're a new sewer. But it just also depends, what you're doing. So when you're stitching, if you've never sewn before, you can use, so you can see here, there's 2 threads. Now, either I can knot the 2 threads together to give you a double thread, or you can knot 1 thread and just leave the other end loose for a single thread.
Okay.
So I mainly like a double thread because I like it to look a little bit more substantial. But if you were doing something and you want it to be super fine and quite invisible, then you might want to use a single thread. This kind of depends on your project. But
I like it. That must make it a bit more sturdy.
I mean, it can, pros and cons, but maybe just try both and see which one you like. Before I automatically knot it again. So the way that I knot thread, so this is my little magic trick for you. So you hold both ends together. So you can see I've got both ends of the thread there. So this is for a double thread. If it was a single thread, just one. And what you do is you hold it between your thumb and your forefinger, and you wrap it. Let me do that again. Okay, so put it there, pinch, wrap, so that it crosses over. Can you see that crossover?
Yeah.
Then I hold my thumb, and applying some pressure, I squeeze and roll off the tip of my finger. And then you'll see it kind of rolls up nicely. And then you can pull that down into a nice knot at the bottom, which really didn't work as usual. So I might just do that again. There you go. Got out of the rhythm. So yeah, and then that should make a nice dense knot at the bottom. You only need to do it once. I just did it twice because it wasn't how I liked it. Anyway.
Magic.
Yeah, so next up, we're going to start sewing. Woohoo! So I just need to figure out which direction I'm going to stitch this, which is always an interesting question, but I think we might go this way. If I was doing this right next to the seam, I'd probably start, so you can see the seam here. So this starts a little way away from the seam. But if I was doing, say, a crotch tear, I'd extend my patch. This one, it's not, and most of the pressure is being applied over here, not against the seam. It's not as important. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to start by pushing the needle through about a centimetre-ish from both edges in a corner, like that. And then I'm going to do a running stitch. So this is where you go in and out, like that. I'm just going to take this pin out so it's out of my way.
Great, you could do quite a few stitches in one go.
Yeah, and then you just sort of pull because you want to make sure the threads are together and have come all the way through. So yes, so this is what a technique that you could do on those jeans as well. So you just want to get a denim or a heavyweight cotton patch would also work. It kind of just depends what you've got lying around, but yeah. And then you put the patch either above or below, it doesn't really matter. If you do it below, it's a little bit more invisible. Whereas if you do it above, it's a bit more of a feature.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like to do lots of stitches at a time. This also helps keep your stitches straighter. So a lot of people, when they're learning to sew, for example, or haven't sewn very much, might try and go all the way in, pull the needle, push it back up. Takes forever and you get very rough. So
my problem would be always not to push it so much that it would be gathering together.
Yeah, so try and don't do too many because otherwise you'll start to get the gathers. You just kind of want to do enough so that it's like manageable. And when I get near the end, so you probably can't see, but the end is about here of this patch. Oh, you can
we actually can see it.
Yeah, so I could do maybe we'll fit 2 more. So I'll do 1 more stitch. Okay. So again, you don't want to go over the edge of the patch. That's because if I go over the edge, then it starts to create a weak point where there's only 1 layer of fabric, which is already a thinning fabric.
Yes.
And then that kind of gives it holes to start tearing at. So try and stay within the patch. So when I get to the end, I go down and then I come back up where I want to start my new line of stitching. Okay, so I'm going to do about this much of a gap. You might do smaller, you might do bigger. The smaller and closer your stitches are, then the more sort of well meshed your fabrics will be, and sort of the more durable, and probably the less noticeable. So bigger stitches are generally more noticeable, and smaller, denser stitches are less noticeable. So how you stitch can look in different ways. So if I wanted to do really invisible stitches, right, I can go down, do a bigger under gap, then just do a little one, and a bigger, and a little, and a bigger. Oh. And then that way you won't see as much of the stitches. So if it's somewhere like, you know, a crotch tear or a booty tear, where you're trying to, you know, not draw the eye to it, perhaps, right, that can also be a good little technique to do that. So you just do these sort of smaller stitches like that. And you can see that I'm not actually going around the patch. I'm going from one side of the patch and going across. So this is because if you go around the patch, what you can end up with is a little nipple in the middle as you go around and you work your way in, and then suddenly you find when you get to the middle that actually there's a bit of extra fabric there and it just puckers up in a little like, sort of effect, which is slightly less than ideal for most people. I mean, some people probably would love that vibe, but most people are a bit more like, oh no. So by working on one side, so again, I've got to the end and I'm just going to do that stitch across. Oops, sorry, moving, there you go. Yeah. The stitch across to come back up. So by moving across, if I've pinned it wrong, for example, then as I go, the fabrics push each other along and stay together nice and flat. So it just means that, particularly if you're working on, say, something that's got a bit of an odd shape, or sort of, you know, this has got a few little bulges from previous tears and things, then that can be can just help it still sit nice and flush, two layers. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to doing bigger stitches, partly because it's faster and partly because I kind of like the look on this shirt. Well, I'm going for that look. Committed.
Yeah, I like it.
So you can also be like super precise with this, and you know, you can do it in more than one direction and start to make pretty patterns, and you know, there's lots of options. So now, can you see that I've only got
a little bit of thread left?
Yeah, so it's probably about 10-15 centimeters maybe. So when you get to about this much, this is a good time to say stop. Okay, don't get to when you've got like this much thread left.
Damn it, that's what I do.
Okay, don't do that. This is a nice amount to work with. So you want to come down and up to the wrong side and check that all your threads are nice and smooth, there's not any bubbles. Okay, and then from this side you grab your needle, right, and where the thread comes out you do a tiny little stitch like that. See, super small.
Yeah.
So all of your threads kind of almost coming out of the same spot. And then what you want to do is you want to loop your needle 1 minute, let's see if I can do this, 2 and 3 times going through the loop. So you've kind of wrapped it around, and then you pull on the needle, and then you can see the knot just sort of shrinks and all those twists go down to the bottom. And with a nail you kind of push the
I use a different technique. I never heard about this technique before.
What technique do you use?
I basically pull the needle through and then circle the thread around it, and it would be similar effect, but it's do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, a bit like a French knot, right? The embroidery stitch.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Yeah. Interesting. Oh, there you go.
Ooh.
Yeah, so this is one, that's just what my mum taught me, but it works really well, I find. And you get it sticks nice and close to the bottom. Probably your technique. But it does highlight a good point that I'm just showing you one way to do things. There's always more ways to do something. And just because you found a different way of doing it doesn't mean that way is wrong. If it fixes it and you like the look, then that's what matters.
I'm glad learning also your way too.
Yeah, no, I always find it interesting because some people are like, oh yeah, I know how to do that, like this little nodding technique, right?
Exactly.
Some people are like, oh yeah, what's so novel about that? And then like I remember when I first showed someone and they were like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't realize this was such a novel thing. So now every time I'm doing it, like, so you might find this interesting. So yeah, so that's pretty much how you kind of do the patch. Is that's essentially the principle of it. So I just then keep going. So
yeah,
I kind of look, where did my last stitch finish? And I go, okay, I want to come back up here. And onwards and upwards. So hit me with your questions and I'll keep stitching along here and I will try and answer them.
Maria, I wondered if there was anything you've currently got in a to fix it pile.
I do have actually a couple of things next to me. But it's just then I might ask because maybe there is a better way of stitching holes in the socks, because I think that's my main problem. I can actually show what I do. So basically very often I get this type of a hole.
Oh yes, in the foot, yeah.
And what I do is really just to stitch it just with a simple thread. But I wonder whether it's just maybe other techniques, or is that way that.
Because I was just looking at the picture. Is that a darning, or are you just stitching kind of like stitching a seam closed?
It's kind of a seaming closed. This is from I'm not sure whether you can see well, but this is how it looks from. Yeah, sorry.
Hang on, I will.
Yeah, I do not know why.
I'll add you to the
spotlight. No, it's me. It's just, I need to remove
the background. Yeah, I think I can kind of see a little bit. I reckon, yes. So that, long story short, yes, there are other techniques. So, oh gosh, okay, I'm getting tangled. Let me just untangle myself here. Okay. Yes, so that might be a good time to show you. Put this to the side. So that can be a good one for darning. So you can darn socks. I'll be very honest and say I currently don't own any socks which have holes which I view as deserving of this when I have such a large mending pile. But you can.
Kind of a good sock, so I'm very.
No, I'm not saying you couldn't. I'm just admiring your dedication because I am not that dedicated. So,
yes, my socks go straight in the rag
to
pile.
be honest, do not want to rave so much about Russia. This is where I grew up, but it's just I so much got used to the real cotton socks even with a lot of a percentage of linen or nettle being used in the material. And then here when I was buying first-time bonds, I thought, whoa, that turned me only a couple of weeks and I already got a hole. I thought I need to do something about it. And then I stopped paying attention really to the quality of the socks I was buying.
Yeah, wow. That's fun. I mean, so interesting. Did you say it was nettle?
Nettle, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's not a big percentage, but it just would be so it's a combination of cotton. It's not by default all the socks will be. There will be also, believe me, there will be a lot of polyester too, but it's just yeah, but it's just I quite like the combination of linen, cotton and nettle together, so it's giving me a good feel for my feet.
Yeah,
it sounds really sturdy.
Yeah,
yes, and they're sturdy.
Quite comfortable. This linen will sort of soften up over time, so they'll probably get better with age too. Those types. So you can darn it. So I can give you a quick demo on the darning. So I'll just show you. Maybe I'll just do this little hole. Can you see the little hole here? So you can do it on bigger holes too, but just so I don't have a really big square to darn tonight, I can show you with a small one. So what I'm doing is sorry, I better get my needle out first. This is the only downside of this one is you get all ready to go and you're like, oh, where's my needle? And you're like, oh, still in the needle. So I'll get a darning needle out. I'll use a real darning needle because speed up the process a bit. So again.
So that is actually just called a mushroom?
Yeah, called a darning mushroom. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's also darning eggs, which, as you'd expect, a shape egg.
Okay. Right.
My elastic that was clearly in that tub for a reason because it just broke on me, but that's all right.
I like your dedication also even fixing the elastic.
Look at it go.
To be honest, it's more of a case of I can't be bothered to find the next nearest elastic because most of my elastic was out in the lounge room, and I'm like, oh, I don't know where another elastic would be. So if I fix it, then I don't need to go hunting. So I'm going to get the little hole near the top, and I'm going to hope that this time my elastic does not snap. So I'm going to position it here. Now you don't really want to strain it lots. So you don't want to stretch it too much. You kind of want it to sit pretty naturally is kind of the goal. And then that way when you take it off, it'll still sit nice. It won't like be this weird giant bubble too much. So I'm going to use this one because I've been using this before. So let me undo some. So you don't always need as much for darning. It kind of depends what you're working with, but something that feels manageable. Again, maybe just an arm length, not an arm length plus a shoulder span, if you're with me on that weird measurement system. So again, I just threaded the needle, and this time I am working with a single yarn, not a double.
Okay, it's thick enough.
Yeah, and so one of the reasons that I'm suggesting this for socks is you don't knot with darning. There's no knotting. So get the idea of knotting out of your head, which is good for socks because you can imagine if the hole is on the heel, you don't really want a tiny knot to irritate your foot. So the way you start with darning is you imagine sort of the shape that you want to do. It needs to be bigger than the hole. And I'm not going to worry about this big ass hole over here. I'm going to pretend that doesn't exist for now. I'm just going to do this tiny hole. And you want to start away from the darn. So you can see that I'm going to make the square sort of like here, but I want to
move it up a little bit.
Yes, let me shimmy. What?
There we go.
You get see a bit more of the messy surrounds of the table, but that's okay. So let me see, maybe I can do it like, oh yeah, that's probably better. Okay, cool. So you want to start out from the edge and pull the yarn in. So you what it's called like tail that we're leaving. So you want to leave a little tail on the end. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create little stitches. The idea is you kind of travel up the columns of the knit or the ribs of the knit, do a little stitch, come back down, do another stitch. Now, I'm just doing this as a single tiny stitch, but if it's somewhere that's got lots of pressure, like a sock, you might want to do an extra stitch at the end, like this, say. Okay. I can just hide that like that. And then that, see how there's the extra stitch? And that can help it be extra secure. And you do that at both ends. Now, I'm not going to do it at both ends because it's going to ruin the aesthetics of this jumper that I'm working on. But that's how I did that other jumper that I showed you.
I like this technique.
Yeah, so it's kind of like reweaving is the idea. So yeah, so that doing those little extra stitches will mean that it looks like
and instead of hiding it, I like that that's exactly showing the
and I mean you can do it in a color if you want to make it match. You can do another color that you like. So yeah, I'll hide those later when I do the rest of the dance. That's all right.
Oh, I love those colors together.
Yeah, so you can figure out kind of what you want to do, but the idea is here I'm trying to make some nice a nice right angle, square.
You're making a square around the hole. You're not just going really close to the hole. There's quite a gap.
And I mean this is just, there's lots of different styles of darning, and you can go around. I just find a nice square is a bit easier when you get to the weaving section because it's a bit less confusing. But that's just me, other people, or once you've kind of got the hang of it. I just think for a demo it kind of makes life a bit easier, because then I'll show, it'll make sense right now. So I'm coming up, just up,
Looks fantastic.
a tiny little bit, and now we're going to weave it back and forth. So it doesn't matter if you start by going over and then under and then over, or under and then over. It doesn't matter for this, for the first one. So I'll just start by going under and then over.
Oh, it's a little wheat bix.
Yeah, so you just go just like that. So I've gone under, over, under, over, under, over, blah, 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 under, over. Then when I get to the end, I get to the end and I go down right on that corner and I do another little stitch, right? Whoosh, right? Sorry if I'm moving it away. Okay, can you see that? And then, so then now the last one, my last stitch was over. So this time I'm going to go under. So the next line, you kind of want to be doing the opposite of what you did the line before. And then that's what will create the weave and create it strong. Now, once I've gone through, for a little darn like this, I can do it all at once, but I might do it in a few steps if it was bigger darn. I then give a little shove to shove the last line.
Ah, brilliant.
Yeah,
so
and
you
that's,
keep it all tight.
Yeah, and that's what sort of, otherwise it can get like a bit weird, in my opinion. It can get a bit weird. So, yeah, so then I'm going to keep going. Nope. Almost got it wrong there. So again, just kind of keeping an eye that you're going, doing that pattern of the over under. And I mean, if you've made a little mistake, I mean, nothing's knotted, so it's always easy to undo, depending on what your level of perfection is. But otherwise, I say just kind of try to get back into what it was supposed to be, because if you start getting off kilter, it'll, you know, just ignore the one that's gone over, over, over. And the next time, just go, you know, under, over, under, or whatever it's supposed to be.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Or you can undo it and redo it, which is, you know, up to you as well. But we all have different levels of diligence.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how you can do a darning. So you can do a bigger section than this, but it's really good for socks because we just kind of keep going until you get the weave.
So entranced by it.
Yeah, it's very nice to watch. I follow a few great people on Instagram who do like some really lovely videos, and you're just like, oh, this is like soothing. It's like
it is,
so therapeutic. Yes. Something's being fixed.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed how quickly you're doing it.
Oh, yeah. I've done this one. This isn't too bad. When they're a bit bigger, it gets a bit more awkward, but because it's a nice small, it's a bit more manageable. It's also like some yarns are easier to keep track of which one you're going over, which one you're under, and some are a bit, some are easy and some are more difficult. I do say though, I don't tend to suggest doing this with embroidery thread, like not a full thread, just because the embroidery thread, you can imagine it's got like 6 strands in it, right? Is how many an embroidery thread.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to figure out which thread is which, when you're trying to go between threads which are made up of 6, it gets a bit hectic.
Gotcha.
So try and pick a thread which is itself a bit thicker. If you're so like a sashiko thread or a top stitching thread can be sort of better options because they'll be like tightly spun, so you can kind of see which thread's which and which one you want to go over and which one you want to go under.
Yeah, right. Make the job a bit easier for yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my goodness, and just like that, it's done.
Yeah, so you can kind of, it's just a little bit of a judgment call as to when you choose to say this will be the last one. So for this, I'll probably make this one the last one. I could try and squeeze one more in, but if you try and squeeze too many in, when you take it off the curve of the mushroom, then it can kind of buckle a little bit. So it's just about finding that sweet spot.
Beautiful.
So once you get to the end, or when you run out of thread, you essentially do the same thing but on the going out. Okay, so you want to leave a little bit of the tail. Then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the rubber band off. Whoosh. I'm going to flip it inside out so I can look at the underside, and I can take this away. Now, can you see these big long jumps?
Oh, Yeah.
They're those tails that we left, so they make it nice and easy to pull them through. And then you want to rethread them on the needle.
Mm-hmm.
It's always threading the needle that takes you like 3 times as long as soon as you the video call. Okay, and then what you want to do is you want to just weave this into the back of your backing fabric.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see I just went in and out and in and out
Mm-hmm.
with the yarn. Do the same going back.
Okay, so you're just sort of fastening it down, but you don't knot it?
Yeah, you don't knot it. It's essentially you want to go in a few directions. So you can just see that I just changed direction, that I went this way and then this way. And now I'm going to go back again in the other direction. So I do suggest trying to change direction a few times. And you don't want to go all the way through the fabric. So you don't really want to go through to your freshly woven patch on the front. You kind of want to stay in a little bit of back fabric that's all covered up by that patch. So once you've done a little like S, right? S back and S. Can you understand that idea of an S? So we like this, and like this, or a Z, whatever takes your fancy. You can trim it like that. And then as you use it, all those fibers will just mesh together and that'll help hold that end in place. And then you do the same for the other one.
Brilliant.
And then
it's brilliant indeed.
Yeah. So you've
Thank you very much for sharing.
That's all right. So there's a bit of a little demo on kind of two key techniques, one being the patching and the other one being a little bit of a darn. But as I said, if you don't have a mushroom, you can always use a lemon or an orange. And if you don't have a darning needle like this one, which is blunt, when you're doing those stitches and the weaving, just use the eye, so the back end of the needle. And then that does the job just fine.
I love those tips. Means you can just use what you've got. Don't need to go out and get a mushroom just yet, although they look fantastic.
Yeah, my general tip, my suggestion is do a few darns and check that you like it, and then it's not going to be something that you are like, no, I'm never doing this again, before you go out and buy the beautiful mushroom. Though, I mean, they do make nice gifts, so, you know, worst case scenario, you just ungift it. But yeah, and then that's done. And I mean, you can imagine.
Fantastic. Yeah, it looks really gorgeous.
Yeah, good job.
Oh yeah, Mike's socks also very special.
Yeah, add more, and then it looks even more deliberate.
Yeah, it makes something that I'm sure is full of holes look so beautiful and so one-off, custom. Fantastic.
So I'll pop my needle back before I lose it. And yeah, that's a bit of a demo. Did you have any other questions, Marie?
No, thank you. I really appreciate all your tips, and just that it felt great watching you, and also inspiring me how to do mending even more fun than before.
That has been inspiring. What about you, Chloe? You got any more projects you need some tips on?
I'm good. I think I'm going to give it a crack. You've inspired me to look at the things that have got holes in and try darning over them and being a bit more visible mendy. And I think I've got some scrap jean fabric that will be perfect for revamping my jeans that have got holes in them.
If you don't feel like darning, you can also make a hole a feature. So this is another jumper that I've got, where you can see that instead of darning the hole, I stitched around the hole and then did a little thicker stitch over the top.
That is so cool.
You don't always have to hide things away or fill things back in.
Yeah.
And then when you have a bit of more of a moth attack, you end up with a little bunch of holes and then they look quite cute. So
that's really sweet.
If you're looking at it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so many holes to darn, you can always go, well, I'll make the holes feature. Just do think about your strategic hole placement, because you know you don't want to be highlighting a hole that's in an awkward position. So
very true.
Yeah,
think it through.
Beautiful.
I love them.
That's it for this evening. Yeah, was there anything else that you wanted to chat about, Chloe, or do you think that wraps it up for the most part?
That wraps it up. Thank you. For the sake of people that might watch in the future, what is your Instagram handle?
Yes, it's _julia.english_. And I do try and pop a few of the highlights in my men's sort of highlight reel, because I do go through fluctuations where I share lots of mending projects, and then I get a bit tired of sharing mending projects and I go for a bit of a break. So it will vary, but I always appreciate it if people say they like something. It's always a good motivator to share more. So if you do find something that I share inspiring, always let me know, because it's great. A great
Brilliant.
motivator.
And I hope we can have you back to learn a few more things. It's been fantastic.
Great. Beautiful.
And Julie, you were talking about the setting up a repair cafe in the university. Do you mean RMIT?
I do mean RMIT.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
that'd be close.
Come along, Maria. So yeah, it's we're sort of still establishing it and figuring out exactly when and where and what, but it's we've done a few events which has been pop-ups so far, so still sort of establishing that. But I also do some events with local council, so if anybody's watching this before October, I do have a Tackle Your Mending Box event on. It's in Forest Hill at Stratford House, and it's a 4-week series where you can come along on a Wednesday night for 4 weeks, and we can tackle some of those bigger projects that you can't always do in one night. So it might be altering something, it could be doing repairs, or it might be that you've got a really giant stack of small projects and we can help tackle, I can help tackle them as well. So,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Do you need to bring supplies along to that? Are there sewing machines?
No, I mean, bring your projects that need mending, but we've got all the supplies. So it's a good
fantastic.
one. I need a sewing machine. We will have a sewing machine.
Yes.
So yeah, beautiful.
Brilliant. Awesome. I hope some people see that and take you up on it, because that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's $80, but it's over 4 weeks. So I think it's a pretty good deal. $10 a night. So
yeah, you'll learn skills for a lifetime. That's the
well
sell.
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, if you get 2 things fixed at least, I think that's not too bad, particularly if you know how to fix them again in the future.
Yes, yeah, you'll get endless wear out of it. That's worth at least an $80 jumper or however much clothes cost these days.
And I feel like also doing it in a mending circle, so in a group of people, it does really, it has a special effect on me too.
Yeah, I think it's motivating, and it's always lovely to see how people interpret things differently. I think I always find that quite enjoyable, and seeing what people connect with and what projects people think to bring. Yeah, it's always lovely.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, you can all learn from each other, and just it would definitely inspire me just to actually fix something that's in my bag of things to fix.
Exactly.
I need a bit of peer pressure.
Yeah, is having a scheduled event that you're like, oh damn it, I paid for it.
Precisely.
Okay, well, I hope you guys all have a nice night, and thanks to everybody who ends up tuning in after the date. And if you do have a mending question on something that you're trying to fix, you're always welcome to reach out to me via Instagram, as I said, _Julia.English_. And I'm always happy to help you out.
Yeah, Koi, thank you very much for organizing, Julia. Thank you very much for guiding. It's been really beautiful to do it in a small circle, and it's a wonderful experience. Yes. And thank you for motivating me to do different ways of mending socks.
Oh, thank you, Maria, for coming along.
Send me a photo when you've done a sock, and I'll be very
Will do.
Yes. Show us all your socks, please. Right.
Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you
Have
both.
a nice night.
It's been fantastic. See you again soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.